Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m, broadcasting on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, please send in your comments, send in your greetings, tell us where you're coming from, and we will do our very best to give you a shout out. And we've got a great guest as well coming on at the bottom of the hour, coming on at 7:30. We have the much requested Highland Pauline, who is going to be chatting to us about the absolute clown show, the absolute bad episode of The Apprentice, which is, of course, the present SNP so-called leadership, so-called contest that we are all getting heartily sick to the gills of, and hoping it would just all end. Well, it's going to be with us until noon on the 27th of March, when we will find out who the first numpty of Scotland actually is going to be. And it looks like it's either going to be Mr. Yusuf or Miss Forbes, with Miss Regan doing her very best to catch up to the two front runners. But we're going to be talking about them tonight. Folks, tell us where you're coming from. Good to see Debbie was first in. Hope you're doing well, Debbie. Always good to see you, and also good to see Paul from the Garden of England, aka Kent. And also hello to Adam from Leicestershire. And Julian Edwards says, greetings from Wales. Love Wales. It's a great part of our one big country, which is our one big united kingdom. Hope things are going well for you. Nice to see Derek from Armadale in the house, and Stuart from Elgin, who says that he received his AFFG badge, which is place of pride, on his lapel. Folks, we are talking here about this badge, which is our AFFG badge, which you can get at our shop, aforceforgood.uk/shop-1, and it's one of our best sellers. It's the United Kingdom with the words "A Force for Good" written right through the middle of it. Says a million words. It says a million words. Adam says, have we heard that useless Yusuf responded to the National when asked about whether Scotland should become a republic when it becomes independent? And yes, he had an interview last week with on Monday with the National. And he did, in fact, say that he wanted Scotland to how did he phrase it? To visit the question within 5 years of becoming separate. Well, what a way to start a Barney, after all, if he even attempted to do that. But the thing is, what he's trying to do is he's making a last-ditch appeal to his hardcore supporters, the hardcore Republican element, of which there are far too many in the SNP, and he's hoping that he'll get their vote. And Ash Regan is apparently trying to do the same thing, because, get this, on the coronation, the Great British Coronation is going to be on Saturday the 6th of May. And so the absolute Scott Nat numpties of the All Under One Banner Brigade are having a march on that day, right? While everybody else in the nation is going to be watching the coronation, they're going to be marching, so-called marching, slouching, shuffling, whatever way you want to describe it, through some streets in Glasgow. and that's going to be on the actual day of the coronation. Now, what the reason for this is that they had booked that march in a long while ago, because they have a march every May. And then the coronation date was announced, and instead of them thinking maybe not a good idea to have the march on that day, they decided just to continue to go ahead with it, and now they're trying to turn it into a big Republican sort of thing. Well, they're going to struggle to do that. Last year, their May march got 773 people at it. I would be very surprised if it got any more than that this year, probably far fewer, I should imagine. However, Humza Yousaf and Ash Regan have both said that they're going to attend it. Can you really believe that? But they have. So what a pair of absolute idiots. The people, and one of them might even be the First Minister by that time, is going to actually attend an anti-monarchy Republican march. Disgraceful, utterly disgraceful behaviour from both Ash Regan and Humza Yousaf. Folks, these people, they really are foolish, and they have no respect for Scotland's history, because goodness me, Scotland is, if it is anything, has always been a monarchy. Even when England had a republic for a few years, Scotland had already crowned Charles II. When Charles I cruelly got his head chopped off, within 6 days, Scotland had pronounced his son, Charles II, King of all Great Britain. Not just Scotland, but King of all Great Britain. So Scotland's always been a monarchy, even when England had a time as a republic. So Scottish history is very much built around the history of Scotland's kings and queens. And in fact, talking about that, our next issue of Union Heart is going to be a dedication to the 420th anniversary year of the Union of the Crowns, which is this year, the year when the Scots King James VI became King of Great Britain back in 1603. We're doing a lot of research into Great Britain's Solomon, as he was called, and we're going to be bringing that out in a very comprehensive and accessible way in our next issue of Union Heart, which will be available free on request to all our monthly donors. Now, before we get to the interview, I want to do Busting Indy Myths Part 25, okay? And this is an important one. Busting Indy Myths Part 25. And in this Busting Indy Myths Part 25, we're going to look at the oft-heard Scottish nationalist SNP myth that the matter of Scotland breaking up the United Kingdom is somehow only for the Scots alone, and it's not a matter for anybody else who happens to live elsewhere in our United Kingdom. It's as if, they're not even involved. Well, what absolute rubbish, and what an absolute myth that is, because keeping the United Kingdom together involves us all, and we all need to stand up for the United Kingdom. And we touched on this, a variation of this, back last February when we spoke about how some SNP supporters think that Scotland breaking up the United Kingdom is only for Holyrood and Scottish political institutions to be concerned about, and somehow it's not something for British institutions such as Westminster to be concerned about, okay? And we can easily dismiss that, of course, because breaking up the United Kingdom is first and foremost going to be a concern of the British Parliament itself, which represents all of the United Kingdom. So that was talking about institutions. This time round, we're talking about actually the people who identify as Scots. And the SNP and the Greens have good cause to try to make people who are, say, English or Welsh or Northern Irish think that somehow they're not involved, okay? Because the SNP is against the whole concept of the United Kingdom. as a construct in and of itself. And it's against the whole idea that there is a British political community of concern. It's against those things. And if it accepts those things, then of course it has to accept that the British Parliament's involved and that every person in the United Kingdom is involved wherever they live. But they don't want to accept those things. Okay, they don't want to accept that people in Aberystwyth have solidarity and concerns with people in Aberdeen, or people in Belfast concerned about people in Birmingham, or people in Glasgow concerned about people in Glastonbury, or people in Manchester concerned about people in Merthyr Tydfil, or people in Dundee concerned about people in Donegal, or people in Lancaster concerned about people in Londonderry, or people in Abergavenny concerned about people in Antrim, or people in Cumbernauld concerned about people in Cardiff. They don't want to accept that there exists that wider British solidarity and political community. They want to get rid of that. And so they're going to turn around and say that if you live in Merthyr Tydfil, or if you live in Donegal, or if you live in Glastonbury, that somehow breaking up the United Kingdom is not your concern. Utterly wrong. And the reason we're touching on this is because we noticed an article in the Sunday Mail back on the 5th of March where a chap there called Ben Fogle, who's a presenter on the television, he says that he was wrong in 2014 as quote-unquote an Englishman to quote-unquote meddle in the referendum at that time. And of course we got straight back to him on Twitter and said, if you believe in Britain and want it to stay together, then it is definitely your business wherever you live and however you identify. And don't allow the SNP to tell you different. Don't accept their deliberate ploy, their deliberate strategy to exclude the millions of pro-UK voices throughout the British Isles and indeed the world. And so the SNP will try to make you feel that it's not your place to comment, but it is absolutely your place to comment if you believe in holding the United Kingdom together. And you can see why the SNP don't want you to comment. They don't want all the people in England, Wales and Northern Ireland and worldwide to pitch in and lend their voice and lend their action and lend their money to the cause of keeping the United Kingdom together. Because if we all did that, then their cause would in fact be lost. So let's just say it again, and let's say it loudly and proudly, and let's keep saying it. If you believe in Britain and if you want it to stay together, then it is definitely your business to be involved, because keeping the UK together involves us all, and together we can make a huge difference in standing up and maintaining and promoting the United Kingdom in the weeks and months and years and decades and centuries ahead in its glorious existence. So endeth Busting Indy Myths, part 25. And folks, we are taking these Busting Indy Myths and we are going to be putting them all into magazine form. The first 10 were put into our winter 2022-2023 issue. Another 10 will be getting put into one of our Union Hearts when it comes out. Issue 10 it will be when it comes out this winter. And so over the next 2 or 3 years, we're really going to have a good set of arguments there. Because, folks, this is a long-term thing. Sure, the SNP are going through trouble at the moment, and sure, they have been set back, but they're always going to be around. It's not like we're ever going to get rid of them. So this is a constant process, that's just the way life is. Paul Hadlow says, a few years ago, Alistair, you wrote an article about why the English particularly should be concerned about the UK breaking up. I think you listed about 23 reasons. Could you promote it again? We absolutely will, Paul. Thank you for saying that. That was actually a speech that we gave, 23 reasons why the English should be concerned about Scotland leaving, and it was a speech that we gave in London, and it's presently, that speech is presently on our legacy site. We've got our guest coming up at 7:30, which is Highland Pauline, and we're going to be speaking about the SNP leadership contest, if that is the correct term for it, or rather the competition to find which clown is going to destroy Scotland the most, unfortunately. So, folks, what happened on this day in British history? Because British history matters, because if we don't know where we've been, then we don't know where we are, and if we don't know where we are, then we don't know where we are going. Well, on this day, one of the great Victorians, a famous British engineer, who's also considered really one of the fathers of modern London, died, and his name, fantastic name that I love saying, Joseph Bazalgette. That's a great name, Joseph Bazalgette. There he is with his amazing facial hair, amazing moustache. What do you call that? Is that handlebar moustache? I'm not quite sure. Anyway, what a chap, and a man responsible for saving thousands, if not millions, of lives. Okay. And he's best remembered for actually being the designer of the sewage tunnels that London uses to this day, the system that it uses to this day. And it was after London had lost tens of thousands of people in cholera epidemics. And back then, they were beginning to understand the significance of why people were dying in such quantities, and the importance of cities having these proper sewage systems. And he came basically to the rescue and created the network of tunnels that serve London to this day. Over 1,000 miles of street sewers in London, and 82 miles of underground sewers as well. And not only that, but he also created bridges, fantastic bridges as well. 4 of the London bridges were designed by him as well. And there's a monument to him on the Victoria Embankment, which we took a photograph of. There it is, Sir Joseph Bazalgette, engineer of the London main drainage system and of this embankment there at Victoria. And he also designed the Chelsea embankment as well. Okay, and I want to just put up some of the sewage pumping stations that he designed, and these look like cathedrals. That's the one at Crossness in Bexley, and inside it, wait till you see this. Okay, that's inside the Crossness sewage pumping station. They filmed the 2009 scenes in the 2009 film Sherlock Holmes there, and look upstairs in it as well. Look at that, right? That's a created to basically pump sewage. I mean to say, they really did create the most beautiful buildings to pump sewage imaginable back then. You know, they seemed to take their time about everything. Maybe they had more time or something back in those days. I don't know. Okay. And then there's another one, the Abbey Hill one in Newham, which is no longer functioning. But look at that. If you said that was a church, for example, you wouldn't know any better. And as I say, that's now a listed building, and it's been replaced by the new pumping station, which looks like that. Okay, a little bit more utilitarian. Crying out loud. It's weird, isn't it? How they seemed to have the time and money back in the day to really put effort into everything. I don't know, was it because it was new or something like that? So they're like, we really have to make the best of this. And then people just got jaded and it was like, oh no, just stick anything up there now. So strange. And of course, he also built, as I said, Albert Bridge, Putney Bridge, Battersea Bridge and Hammersmith Bridge. And Hammersmith Bridge is really one of the most beautiful bridges in Britain. A fantastic piece of work, still in use today. He designed that. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So that's Joseph Bazalgette. He passed away on this day, 15th of March in 1891. One of Britain's great civic heroes. Please, folks, please welcome Highland Pauline. Hey there, Pauline. How are you tonight?
Fine, thank you, Alistair.
Good. Well, you've been on the show several times before. For those of you who are not aware, you do a lot of work on Facebook. You're putting out your thoughts every day on the matter, all of which we totally concur with. And I know you've had a lot to say regarding the SNP clown show, or what you've termed a bad episode of The Apprentice. And so let's just talk about your thoughts on that. Have you actually been watching? Have you subjected yourself to any of the hustings that have been going on?
Yes, I have been very brave, very brave. I spent evenings shouting at the television. There's no surprises there. It's really what we expected. All three candidates are really sadly lacking credibility. There's obviously one front runner, I suppose we have to admit that. But even she, and I'm referring to Kate Forbes, is not up to the job. She's trying very, very hard, though, I have to say. But it's quite embarrassing. It really is quite embarrassing. I think a lot of people have, to me, and that express their embarrassment for Scotland, that is this really the best that we have? Is this the best we have to offer?
Yes, there's harder hitters, I suppose, in the SNP. Some of the older blokes, I'm thinking of, John Swinney and Angus Robertson and one or two of their MPs, perhaps. But I find it telling that they are not wanting to get involved in this leadership election, even though it would seem to be fitted for them. Even though now you would think, well, Sturgeon's been around for so long now, I want my go at it. But they don't seem to want to touch that. Do you have any ideas why they wouldn't want to get involved?
I mean, I think the whole background, as we know, really, the whole background of the SNP has been one of corruption. So much has been wrong. There's been so much cover up. There's been no accountability. And these guys, they know it. They're running for the hills. They couldn't get out of the studio quick enough. It was like, oh no, John Swinney's going to retire. And I mean, he was obviously, it's normally the deputy that you would think would step up, but he was never putting himself forward because he knows too much. There's so much to come out. There's still so much to come out. It's probably going to take a long time. But the guys closest to Sturgeon, the ones that really knew, are the ones that have run to the hills for a very good reason. It's self-evident that there's an awful web of lies and misinformation and cover-up, and they don't want to be part of it. I mean, I almost pity the three contestants, because there's a sort of a naivety about them. I mean, Humza just comes across as well. He's the puppet, of course. He's very confident because he's got the backing of the SNP headquarters behind him, and the other two, perhaps they really feel that politics is their vocation. But certainly for Ash, I would suggest she looks elsewhere. Forbes is bright enough, but she's a confusion. There's something very confusing about her. I can't help thinking she probably chose the wrong party. Especially when you know that her partner, her husband, is a a kind of closet Tory, and then she's got her Christian beliefs, which are certainly not part of the SNP progressive idea. So it's just a mismatch of people there. It's just a mess. And the older ones, maybe the ones that knew a bit more, I mean, they couldn't get out of it quick enough. They didn't want anything to do with it. Speaks volumes, don't you think?
Yeah, there's definitely, if everything was above board, then if I was one of these longer serving members of the SNP, whether an MSP or an MP, I'd think, well, now's my chance. Yeah. I can go in and make a do of this and lead the country to, freedom or whatever they see going on in their heads.
Freedom, yes.
Yeah. But no, they're just like, oh no, I'm not going to touch that. As somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago, it's a poisoned chalice.
Absolutely. And
it's become a poisoned chalice, and it's become a poisoned chalice because of the mismanagement of the SNP, and also the cause of independence by Sturgeon in the last since she's ever been in power, which was what,
8 years?
Yeah, 8 years. So, and longer if you include her deputy leadership. So, it's a poison chalice, and nobody wants to touch it. And so you're left with these three people that you say are like naive. It's only like the naive people that are like, oh yeah, I'm going to try to make a go of this. And well, we'll see what occurs. But I mean, some people say, oh, I'd like to see Humza in there, because if he was in there, then he'd make such a mess of it that people would no longer vote for the SNP. But I actually don't go along with that way of thinking, because I know that there's a very hard core in the Scottish National Party, which makes up a lot of their membership, who'll vote for anybody. I mean, regardless, when it comes to the election time. You can make a complete mess of things, but all that really matters is the vote on the day. And they'll vote for Humza just as quickly as they'll vote for Kate Forbes or whatever, because it's the label that they're voting for. It's the SNP thing. It's not they're voting for the man or the woman who's made a good or a bad job of it. And so I'm not convinced by the argument that, oh, we've got that from our perspective, Humza would be a good thing, because he'll make a mess of things.
To be honest, I think they will all three of them are perfectly capable of making a mess of things. Realistically, there's only two in the fight, Forbes and Humza. Humza is only in the fight because he's got SNP HQ backing him to the hilt. I mean, that's their man. He's their puppet. He's standing up after 8 years of failure from Nicola Sturgeon. Absolute failure. You only have to look at the country to see how dreadful she's been. She talked the talk and she demolished the country at the same time. After all that failure, she's not walking away. She's just getting somebody else to front the whole game. Between her and Murrell, they are working Humza. So vote for Humza and you get the same again. So you get Sturgeon and Murrell. I think Forbes is probably more honest, because she started off honest and then somebody had a word with her and she stepped back a bit. But she's not up to it. She's not capable. She's at odds with the SNP hardcore, so it's not going to go well for her. Mm-hmm. It's an absolute mess, really, when you think of it. I think SNP HQ are actually panicking at the moment. I think they believe that, they're concerned that Forbes is doing so well. I don't think they were prepared that the general public were on her side. I mean, she's certainly ahead in certain polls. They're absolutely panicking. And I think actually they've brought in Sturgeon's right-hand woman, Liz Lloyd, who's a very high earner, but she was Sturgeon's special advisor. And they've now recruited her in to help with the Humza Joseph campaign. So HQ are really pushing Humza forward. It's quite embarrassing, really, that this is so blatant.
Yes, they're definitely pushing Yusuf forward. And I don't know if you saw a letter that Ash Regan wrote today. In fact, I'll just bring it up on the screen. But it was Ash Regan. It was only signed by Ash Regan, but she said that she was speaking for both herself and for Kate Forbes. And she had questions that she's asking of Peter Murrell, and this has created quite a bit of a stir. Dear Mr. Murrell, I am writing this open letter on behalf of the campaign teams of Ash Regan and Kate Forbes. Bear in mind, this letter is only coming from Ash Regan, so that's strange. That's a very strange thing straight away, but this is a genuine letter. It's creating a big stir in the media today, both of whom are contesting for the leadership of the SNP. We request that you provide essential information pertaining to the membership status. And she goes on and asks the following 3 questions. 1, please that you disclose the following. 1, the total number of paid up members currently within the SNP. Well, wouldn't we all love to know that figure? Yes. Number 2, the number of digital voting papers that have been sent out to members.
Yeah.
And 3, the number of physical postal voting papers that have been issued. We have previously reached out to the National Secretary with a request for this information. However, we have yet to receive a response. As the CEO of the SNP, it's your responsibility to ensure that the leadership election process is transparent, fair and equitable. We kindly request that you respond to this letter and share the requested information as soon as possible. Okay. So that's a very strange and surprising thing, and straight away it tells me that there's going to be a cloud hanging over the result of this election, one way or the other. Do you have any thoughts on what you just saw there?
Absolutely. I mean, it shows a total lack of trust in Murrell and the leadership, a total lack of trust. They feel the need to remind him of his duties, which, you know, most people would find insulting, but in this case it's absolutely spot on, of course. And, you know, the fact that it's from Regan and Forbes and Humza's not included is also obviously pointing a massive finger at what they think is going on. I think it's perhaps clever because they are saying to people, look, this isn't honest. But that's the party they're trying to represent. So it's kind of like we want to stand for the SNP and we believe in independence. But, oh, by the way, you know, we don't really think things are honest and things are being run properly. I mean, it's a flipping nightmare. You couldn't make it up. You know, as far as SNP membership goes, who knows? I mean, the one thing we do know is over the last 4 years, they've lost over 50,000 members. So we know times are hard in the SNP, and we know every day people are voting with their feet. Memberships are being thrown back at them. But I mean, this letter is actually absolutely pointing the finger at the chief executive of the SNP, and quite rightly so, I think, to be honest.
Oh yeah, it's beggars belief that an institution of that size is running a leadership election, and the people who are running it don't actually know how many people they're appealing to. You know, what's the size of the crowd that I am actually trying to lead? Okay, if I'm going to lead an army, I want to know, is this an army of 20 guys or 20,000 or 200,000 or 2 million? You know, you need to know these are just like basic things. And imagine if, like, the last Tory leadership election campaign had been run on that sort of level, with that degree of obscurity, deliberate obscurity. Hiding essential facts from the people who are aiming for the very top job. So the whole thing just really does stink.
They wouldn't get away with that. Of course they wouldn't. And, you know, I think the numbers and all this things that they want. But there was a very good quote from Stalin, in fact, who said that it's unimportant who votes, but what's important is who counts the votes. I mean, How do we know that any of this is going to be honest and above board? And even if Murrell and that ever come up with figures of how many this and how many postal votes, who is counting them? I mean, the corruption, and I have no hesitation in calling it corruption, of the Scottish National Party is well known. What we see is just unheard of in our lifetime. So they can have many elections and many votes, but they will only tell us what they want us to accept. So I'm in fear that whatever happens, Humza Joseph will be their puppet, and that's who we will land with. For better or for worse. As I've said already at the beginning, I don't think any three of them are any good, so it won't really make too much difference to us. But the corruption is the problem here, and the problem is that if it's Murrell with Sturgeon still pulling those strings, then Scotland really needs to shake itself at the next election. The electorate need to wake up. They really do.
Well, yes, absolutely. The waking up thing is one thing. Getting out of bed is the difficult part, though, and lots of people might be woken up to it, but the number of people who want to maybe do something about it or change the way they or the times they normally get out of bed is few and far between. I always think so. I don't put great hope in people waking up as such, but more people need to get moving, as it were, and moving in the right direction.
The bottom line, really, Alistair, is that if people do really care about Scotland, if they do really love Scotland, then finally the power is within their hands to save it. It's a choice that everybody has to make. Yeah. We can fight and fight and fight, but as long as these idiots keep going out there and voting for a corrupt party, then we're going to struggle. That's the bottom line. Yeah. However, they are hemorrhaging votes. They are losing. I mean, it was fantastic standing outside Holyrood with SNP voters, previous SNP voters, and hearing them shouting Sturgeon out. That was fantastic.
Yes, that was at the Glasgow Cabbie event back in start of the
January.
year.
Yeah, January.
Yes. Well, I knew the tide was turning when I went to the Let Women Speak rally, which was held 5th of March? No, 5th of March, February. Yes. It was February, I think. Need to look February. That up. But there was hardcore SNP people there, Alba people there, and there was a lot of people that Sturgeon would be wanting to appeal to, and they all were against her completely and utterly. And I thought, if she's losing these people, she is on the way out. And it was literally 10 days later when she resigned. Yeah. And so she brought all that down upon herself, and none of that's been really properly put to bed. There's been no closure there, and it looks like silly Humza is going to reawaken the whole thing as well. When he gets in, he's going to just go back as if he's not learned his lessons from what's happened, and he's just going to dig that particular hole an awful lot deeper.
So going back to that letter which you showed, that is really Regan and Forbes saying to people, let's be suspicious. You have to ask questions. And that's what they're saying. They're saying we don't trust the system. Quite rightly so.
Yeah. Well, if they were, one of them will lose. But if they were both to lose, then they really should push that angle and really make a thing of that, and really stand up for it, because they've laid the groundwork of suspicion now. So if they lose, then they really need to carry that forward and say, what are the answers here, and just see what that happens. And one way or the other, I think the SNP is in for an awfully bumpy ride. If he gets elected, then there's going to be all the fear of the Murrell hand behind the scenes. And if, say, Forbes gets elected, then she's going to cause a big fallout in the party. There's a lot of people who won't get behind her because of her particular beliefs. The Greens are not going to be interested. No. They're going to walk from the coalition, which is actually strategically very good for us.
All this infighting is very good for us. This whole shambles is very good for us. It's just how long it all takes to play out.
Mm-hmm.
But we've talked about this for a number of years now. We've said, it's gonna end in tears and give Sturgeon enough rope and blah blah blah. And in fact, that is what happened. She got enough rope and she made an absolute mess of it. And now we're kind of seeing, I wouldn't like to say demise, but we are seeing the downfall of them gradually and bit by bit. And this leadership election is highlighting that and highlighting the problems. And we just hope that we will carry those forward to the next election and all of a sudden get a good clear out to give Scotland a chance, to give us hope, so we can lick our wounds and repair ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's all good from our perspective. It's all good. Whoever wins, it's going, as you just say. It's the SNP's simply not going to bounce back from it, and it's going to stagnate. And it's up to us to keep pushing our positive message of unionism, which is the message of solidarity for us all throughout the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
The message of love your brother and sister, basically, throughout the United Kingdom, English, Welsh,
one
Scots,
island
Northern
nation
Irish.
Here. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Together we're stronger. We will always be stronger. Alone, no way.
That's right. Well, been doing quite a bit of research recently for our next issue of Union Heart, and going back and looking at the arguments that were being made at the time of the Union of the Crowns in 1603, 420 years ago. And there's a lot there that it could be simply be said today. It was the same arguments that were being promoted about England and Scotland joining together and attempting at that time to get rid of all their quarrels that they had been that they had been hitherto wrapped up in. And there was the belief that it was going to bring in a new golden age for all of the British people. And it was at that time that they started to talk about the British as one people rather than as separate quarrelling tribes as they had been hitherto. Yes. And exactly the same arguments of solidarity, although they didn't have that word back then, but it was that basic camaraderie and stuff like that they were talking about. And it really is a positive message. Unionism, I mean, the clue is in the name. Union is better than separation. And if we just need time to build that message and to articulate it and to convince people, because it's a good message and it is a winning message, and it's far better than anything that Humza Yousaf's going to ever come up with. I mean, the only thing he can come up with is progressivism, whatever that means.
Repeating progressive all the time. It's absolutely awful. He's obviously being groomed. He's been groomed to say these things. I mean, when I heard him come out with the fact that Sturgeon should be an ambassador or some kind of, I was like, she's a foul politician. In 8 years, she's brought Scotland to its knees. And he's actually thinking she should be an ambassador. Well, I've never heard so much rubbish in all my life. Yeah, we're not stupid.
An ambassador and maybe one of these kind of pretendy embassies that the SNP likes to set up.
Yeah. I mean, absolute nonsense. But it's all very interesting, and I think we're making progress. Can I just say that? I think we're making progress.
Oh, absolutely. I see it as positive. I see it as good and positive, and something that 2 months ago I would never have thought we would be in this position. I mean, it was looking like we're going to have Sturgeon until at least the Scottish election in 2026, and then maybe for another 5 years thereafter. I mean, it was literally, that was what I was thinking at the start of the year, and then just how quickly things change on a turn of
a lot going on in the background still, a lot to come out. I believe it was many things that brought about her resignation, not just one thing. Her fall in popularity, they had to do something about that. Gender recognition bill, what a mistake. What a dreadful mistake that was. There's financial improprieties going on, police investigations, so much. It was a perfect storm. She couldn't stay. And to rescue the party, she had to go. And Murrell's pulling the strings and saying, oh, don't worry, we'll just get a puppet in here and he'll just do what we want him to do. And that's where we're at just now.
That's where we're at, yeah. And in addition to the things that you mentioned there, the British government finally developing a set,
yes,
and standing up to them.
About time.
And that was when they kind of hit the brick wall, nose first. And Sturgeon was like, well, I can't actually get through that anymore.
And we're waiting for them again now on the bottle scheme to stand up. We're still waiting for that.
Yeah, well, somebody said to me that, what was it? Humza had said something to the effect that it was in the Daily Telegraph today, Humza accused Kate Forbes of, quote-unquote, lurching to the right for her plan to pause the deposit return scheme. So if you want to pause the deposit return scheme, apparently now you're lurching to the right, according to Humza. Which doesn't surprise me, obviously not. No. Well, people should just pick up litter. I mean, that would solve the problem. If people just picked up litter or put the bottles in the bin, If people did that, we wouldn't need a deposit return scheme. Anyway, we've been speaking for 25 minutes there, yes. Highland Pauline. Thank you very much for coming on the show. We'll definitely have you again. And all I can say is until next time, keep up the good work on Facebook, because you really are a power of common sense.
I've got so much to say and the day's just not long enough.
Oh, exactly. I know
okay,
what you mean.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on A Force for Good.
Good stuff, Pauline. We appreciate it. See you next time.
Okay.
Right,
cheers.
Bye now.
Bye.
Great stuff. Highland Pauline there. Christopher comments saying, Kate Forbes is not bright enough to understand basic economics. All of them, though, are the apogee of mediocrity. And the Stalin analogy fits the SNP nicely, doesn't it just? Pipposaurus says, let's hope they have been caught with their mucky little fingers in the till. Becky says, SNP seem to hate England more than they love Scotland. That's the problem. Kelly J. Keane was brilliant at Let Women Speak, says Becky. And Anthony was there at Holyrood when the Supreme Court stood up against Sturgeon and said that as the law stands, she couldn't get a referendum. And Anthony was there with a Force for Good that night, waving the flag, pointing out that it's great to be British. There we were. We want to stay in the UK. That was the day that the Supreme Court said that Sturgeon couldn't get her referendum, and that was probably where we can start dating the beginning of the end for her. Anthony says, thanks for coming on, Pauline. Catherine says, thank you, Pauline. And that Preston journalist says, great show, great guest. Thank you, Ash. Ash does some fantastic videos at youtube.com/that Preston journalist. Check them out. Ash was our guest last week. It is a cracking pick, isn't it, Anthony? Slim says, Ash, you should do live streams more. Derek, thanks for your comment. Derek says, great show tonight. Pauline was brilliant. That deserves a thumbs up. Anthony says, Ash is a legend. Isn't he just? Stuart says, great show, as always. Becky says, I see your poster has changed to Sturgeon was not Scotland. Yeah, we're keeping that up just for a little while the current leadership so-called contest is underway. It's the top of the hour. We're going to be back next week when we will have another guest next week. It is going to be David Clues of UNN, of Unity News Network. So David is always great fun, great entertainment, and a great activist. So we'll have a lot to say to him, and he'll have a lot to say to us next week as well. So And if you know of anybody who would like to be a guest, or if you'd like to be a guest, simply just tell us and we will definitely investigate it. So please do suggest a guest. Suggest a guest if you can, because we're always looking for folk who have got a lot to say on the Union. Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony, and thanks for all your good work. Cracking show as always. And folks, remember, a wee book for the Union. No unionist should be without a copy, and you can get that at our shop. Okay, folks, it just remains for me to say, remember to get your wee book for the Union, and God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the King. See you next week.